Hey everyone, Jeremy Gerard from Mythic Customs here with one of my short customizing tutorial videos. This video is going to be about working with 3D printed parts. Now, if you're customizing Mythic Legions, working with parts from the 3D companies has probably become a big part of your customizing hobby. Those who are getting into customizing are seeing a lot of these parts and they inevitably have some questions because they've never worked with 3D parts before. I see a lot of the same questions get asked, so I thought that I would shoot a video because I can approach this topic from a few different perspectives. As a customizer, I've used 3D parts from literally every company seemingly out there offering 3D parts for the Mythic Legions line. I also have a relationship with Wolf King Customs, and they put out products that I help to create. So I can see it from both kinds of perspectives. Although I'm not a 3D printer, I don't own a 3D printer, I have had the chance to talk extensively with Len LaGuardia of Wolf King Customs, so I do have at least a little bit of that kind of behind the scenes knowledge of what goes into this. And I certainly have a ton of that, front stage, I guess you would call it, perspective of working with these parts. So first things first, when you're buying these 3D parts, you're either buying totally unpainted pieces or you're buying already painted parts. I'm going to talk a little bit about both, but most of this is going to be focused on unpainted parts since that's where more work goes into. Now, if you're buying a fully painted piece, and I have one of my popular Kitsune fox heads here, if you're buying one of these fully painted pieces from one of the 3D companies, oh, and by the way, I mentioned that a lot of the work I do is with Wolf King Customs. The products I'm showing are from Wolf King Customs. What I'm talking about today doesn't only apply to that company. This applies to pretty much all of the 3D printers. There are some differences between them that I'll talk about, but by and large, the tips that I'm going to offer are across the board for any of these 3D parts that you buy. So this is, again, that fully painted Kitsune fox part. Whether you're buying a part like this directly from the company or whether you are paying an artist to paint it for you and then you're getting it, when you get one of these parts, they're pretty much ready to go. They're kind of like pop it on and you're good to go. You do want to be mindful of a few things. These are made of resin. So unlike the factory produced figures that are this plastic, these are a lot more durable than any 3D part are ever going to be. So you just need to be careful. In addition to the resin itself, there's a custom paint job on this. Now, I know that whenever I paint these pieces, I seal them for protection, but there's only so much you can protect against. The bottom line is any custom painted 3D part is not going to hold up to the same kind of handling and wear and tear that a factory produced piece would be able to accept, I guess you could say. So just be careful when you deal with them. It's not like they're made of glass, but you do want to be careful with that. So when you get one of these parts, you get the figure you want to put it on. Now I have an Elf Ranger here. I'm going to pop his head right off. And most companies, when they create these parts, they create the ports a little bit larger than any of the neck sockets they're going to go on. There's a reason for that. And it's actually a little bit of a debate in the 3D kind of parts marketplace, I guess you could say. If it pops right on, that's called a pop fit. It's really, really satisfying. It's wonderful to get ahead and pop it on, and it feels exactly like you are popping on a factory-produced head. But once again, remember I just talked about their very different materials, their different kinds of resiliency. The reality is this plastic has a lot more give. It's a lot more forgiving when it comes to different temperature variations. Resin isn't as forgiving. So if you make this super, super tight so it pops on, you run the risk that if it gets too cold and it's too brittle, you could actually crack it by popping it on. I actually have broken a few resin pieces that were made to be pop fit just because for whatever reason the temperature wasn't right, it didn't go on right. So making it a little large is by design. Companies do that to make it more, or I should say less likely that the part's going to break. It actually also gives it a little bit more flexibility if you want to use it on figures other than Mythic Legions. obviously this channel and all the work that I show are Mythic Legions, but if you want to throw these on a Star Wars Black Series or a Mezco figure, you can certainly do so. They all have different neck pegs. A larger size will give you some variety in how you can work with it. What you're going to want to use to make that head not just be all floppy is what I call blue tack. So this is like poster putty. There's a lot of different versions of this out there. This is one that I get. It's by a company called Loctite. That's Loctite. And all you have to do here is rip off a little piece of this. This putty is meant to go like on a wall, so you can put like posters up or something. But all you're going to want to do is get this little putty, get a little ball of it, and just put it right on the neck post there. So you just got a little bit of putty. Then you take that head, and if you just put that head on and you press down, that head will now stay in place. It's not going to fall off. It's nice and secure, but it still allows for total range of movement. Okay? If it's sitting too high up on the neck, use a little less putty. Very, very simple to work with. If you're getting a painted piece, that's really all you need to know. Be careful handling it. Use a little bit of putty. Now, what about unpainted pieces? That's a different story. So here we go. I have an unpainted piece. This is one of the wolf or the woven werewolf style heads that were offered by Wolf King Customs somewhat recently. This is actually the evil wolf. His name was Skull. So really cool piece. This is a piece just like all of the kitsune that I just showed and a few others here. These are parts that I helped bring to life by working with Walter DeMarco at Mass Customs and then with Len at Wolf King to print. You're going to get a head like this. Now, different companies use different kinds of resin. You might get different colors. This one is kind of a light grayish. I've seen some that come in that are teal, that are dark blue, that are almost black, that are white, that are flesh colored. There's lots of different resins. You're going to get some variety there. The bottom line is they all work somewhat similar. Now, there are different kinds of resin. So I know there are some companies that are putting out pieces that are meant to be a little more flexible, like loincloths and stuff. Those may be a different resin than some of the other pieces. If you ever have a question with how to use something, reach out to the company itself, reach out to the 3D printing company that produced it, and ask them the question. They'll be more than happy to tell you what you need to know. But by and large, you're going to get these pieces. They're kind of a hard, resin type thing. The first question I see a lot of people ask is, do I have to wash it? I know some customizers do. I believe my friend Nikki Nicole Cheney always washes it with a little, little mild soap and water and then dries it. I honestly never wash them. I don't know if I'm supposed to, but I never do, and I haven't had any problems. One thing you will possibly find is when these get printed, there are little pieces of it called supports. So when it gets printed on the bed, they have to have these little, almost like an armature that supports the head on the 3D printing bed. What you're going to find is that when they get the head off the 3D printing bed, they have to break off that armature, all of those supports, okay? Almost all of the 3D printing companies that you're going to buy from, they remove those supports, they sand it down if needed, they clean it for you essentially. You may occasionally, remember, if they're putting out a bunch of these heads, it's easy for them to miss a little tiny nub from a support. If you ever get one of these heads and there's just a little tiny, looks like a piece of excess plastic, for the most part, you could probably just pop it off with your nail. Just scrape it and it'll come right off. I know some people will talk about sanding them down. I would be very, very careful with that. These things have fine detail in them. You don't want to hit it with a sandpaper, or you certainly don't want to hit it with something like a Dremel. If you do that, yeah, you're going to get the little burr off, but you're going to wipe out any of the details. So just be very, very careful. If you get a little stray support, just your nail should pull it right off. It shouldn't be a problem. If it's a little bit harder and you got to get a little piece of fine grit sandpaper, do that, but be careful you don't blow out the details. Once again, I don't actually clean them, nor do I prime them. That is the second question that everyone asks. Do you prime your parts? I don't prime anything that I work with. I do, however, spray base coats. So with this head, this particular head here, I wanted it to be black. The character that I created was a black, like dark gray type wolf. So the first step that I did was I took that head and I based it out in black spray paint, okay? I just use Krylon flat black spray paint for most of my projects. I would say that probably 75 to 85% of the parts that I paint, I base out in black spray paint first. The exception to that is if I'm working on a part that I don't want to be anywhere close to black. For example, this custom here is one of the Badgerine heads from Wolf King Customs. I wanted this head to be white. If I would have based this out in black, I would have had to paint all of that white on top of it. Painting white on top of black is not the most fun thing to do. So what I did here, even though he's got black on him, was I based this head out in white first, and then I painted on the black details, the markings on his eyes, the nose itself. I painted all of those in black. So I don't always use black as a base coat, but when I'm working with any of the heads, I do use a base coat. That Kitsune Fox head that we looked at a minute ago, this was actually based out in orange. It was based out in this orangish color, and then I dry brushed on the white under his chin, and then I painted the nose and the eyes. So most of the time I use black, but not always. Here's an example here. This wonderful squid head custom is one that Len from Wolf King put out. This is an example of a head that I did base out in black to begin with. I based this out in black, I dry brushed on the purple, and then I used a little metallic that I also dry brushed to give it that cool sheen to create this final character here. Now back to the woven figure, the wolf figure. So once I base that out in black, then I bring it in and I start doing the detail. So in this particular case, this was the finished product. So in this one here, even though I started black, I dry brushed on a couple different shades of gray just to get a little bit of color variation in that fur. Then I painted the details, including his teeth, that scar over his eye, and the two different color eyes he's got there. Then finally I actually painted the nose, because even though it started black like this, when you dry brush that gray on, you lose some of that black on his nose, so I would then go in afterwards and get that. So that's a tip that I'll tell you when working with these. Plan out the process. Plan out what you are going to do. Look at the part and figure out, okay, how do I want to approach this piece? What are the different colors I'm going to use on this? Before you paint it, look at how others have painted it. So I know for Wolf King, every part that is sold, we show painted versions of it before the sale even goes live to give you some ideas of how it could be painted. Now, not every 3D company does that, but you're certainly going to see other customizers using parts from those companies as well if they don't show it themselves. It's okay to wait to see what other people are doing so you can get some ideas and inspiration. Whether you take those ideas and make them your own and do something different, or whether you copy them somewhat exactly. There's really no shame in that. If you see something really cool that you like a lot, go ahead and do it. Make your version of that part. That is not a problem. So that is what I would suggest. Look at this, figure out how you're going to base it out, what colors you're going to apply to it. You can certainly clean it if you want. That's not going to hurt it. Just make sure it's dry before you start painting it. Certainly be okay. I do seal all these parts. So I talked a little while ago about sealing the Kitsune Fox parts. You're going to want to do that with these pieces just to help protect them. I just use a little bit of sealers from Testers. It's a little, matte sealer. Spray that on, no problem at all. It goes on glossy. It looks like it's going to be shiny. It dries totally matte. You would never know it's there, but it gives you that little bit of extra protection. I would absolutely recommend that for any of these 3D parts as well. The last thing I will suggest when working with these 3D parts is if you do paint one up and you do post it and you share it on the Mythic Legion's Cabal or on your Instagram or whatever, give credit where credit's due. The artists that work on creating these pieces put a lot of hard work into them, and they frankly love seeing other people use their parts. So if you tag them in your post, not only does it give them credit, it allows them to see how you've used it. That's really, really cool. It's certainly something over the years. Like I said, I've used parts from every provider out there. I've always tried to give credit to the sculptor, to the artist, any artist that worked on it, to the company that printed it. If you don't know who the artist is, reach out to the company. They should be willing to help tell you who that artist is so you can give credit. It's just a really cool thing. And in a community like this that's filled with so many creative artisans, it is wonderful to give credit where credit's due and to shine the light on others a little bit as well if you're using one of their parts. So those are my suggestions for using these 3D parts. Again, there's a ton of companies out there. If you're on the Cabal, if you're following any of the Instagram, certainly if you're following my Instagram, you'll see that I post parts from Wolf King and all these other companies all the time. These are the things you need to know. If you buy the parts and you buy them unpainted, it's a great project to work on. I have another video on here about what kinds of paints you should use, but I think I've covered most of the questions that I see people ask on here. Do I have to prime them? How do I paint them? Do I have to seal them? How do I put them on the figures? All things like that. Thank you very much for checking out this video. If you enjoyed this topic and you enjoy videos like this, let me know in the comments. Give the video a like, and certainly if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, what are you waiting for? That helps me out and it helps you out because it notifies you automatically every time I post a video like this. Thank you very much for checking it out. I can't wait to see what you make.